Okay, let's dive right into this explainer of T.S. Eliot's famously difficult poem, The Wasteland. Now, if you've ever tried to read this thing, you know it can feel a bit like a giant jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces are just missing. But today we're going to approach it a little differently. We are going to treat this poem as a sort of cultural autopsy of a broken post-World War I society. So grab your doctor's coats because we're going to examine the symptoms, uncover the root cause, and actually look for a cure to the modern condition. To start us off, I want you to really consider this famous opening hook from the poem. Why is April the cruelest month? You know, normally we think of spring as this beautiful time of rebirth and joy, right? But Eliot instantly flips our expectations completely upside down. In his profoundly bleak perspective, the spring rain isn't bringing life. It's stirring up dull roots, it's mixing memory and desire, and it's bringing all this deep, painful trauma right back up to the surface. It's absolutely brilliant because it instantly pulls us into a world that is deeply, deeply uncomfortable with coming back to life. Since this poem is notoriously chaotic, here's a quick roadmap for our diagnosis today. First, we'll welcome you to the wasteland. Then we'll examine a broken, isolated world, move into the decay of intimacy, uncover the crisis of faith, and finally look at death and rebirth. Let's start with part 1. Welcome to the wasteland, the problem of a broken society. So, here is the core problem Eliot is diagnosing. Written just shortly after World War I, this poem reflects a truly staggering level of generational trauma. The war left civilization feeling completely fractured. I mean, just let this striking poetry breathe for a second. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Eliot viewed the modern world as literally and metaphorically barren. He described it as a heap of broken images. And actually, here's a surprising fact that really brings it all home. Eliot wrote a lot of this world-shattering, desolate poetry while he was actively recovering from a nervous breakdown. He was literally experiencing the exact exhaustion he was writing about. And to illustrate this fractured world, Eliot throws this incredibly chaotic cast of characters at us. We meet Marie, who is terrified on a sled and reads all night just to avoid her own life. We meet Madame Sostres, this famous clairvoyant who happens to have a bad cold and a wicked pack of tarot cards. There's an incredibly bored typist and a bold young clerk. Oh, and a woman named Lil having a rough time in a pub. Now, on the surface, these vignettes seem totally disconnected. But they're actually all fragments of the exact same traumatized world. They're all suffering from the exact same modern disease. Which brings us to part 2, a broken, isolated world, the symptoms of alienation. Okay, let's look at the actual symptoms of this societal illness, starting with extreme alienation. Eliot sets the stage for this in what he perfectly calls the unreal city. Picture a brown, foggy London on a freezing winter morning. It's a bustling metropolis, and yet the modern citizens walking these streets are totally disconnected from one another. It's honestly a lot like staring at our phones on a crowded subway today. People are physically right next to each other, but emotionally and spiritually, they are miles and miles apart. And this next observation brilliantly illustrates the deadening effects of the modern world. The commuters flowing over London Bridge aren't vibrant, energetic city dwellers. They are practically walking like zombies. Every single man has his eyes fixed firmly on his own feet, just letting out short, infrequent sighs. The speaker even recognizes an old war buddy named Stetson in the crowd and yells out to him, but a true connection is just impossible. They can only relate to each other through the shared, unspeakable trauma of the war. Now, the crucial point in understanding why everyone feels so dead inside is the legend of the Fisher King. Eliot weaves this heavily into the poem. In the myth, you have this king who is mortally wounded in the groin, making him impotent. And as his body wastes away, his entire kingdom dries up and dies right along with him, just waiting for a knight to bring the Holy Grail to heal him. Eliot uses this to make a powerful argument. Modern society is suffering from that exact same affliction. We have a profound spiritual sickness, which has resulted in a completely sterile, dying kingdom. That takes us to part 3, sex, lust, and impotence. The decay of intimacy. This whole idea of sterility brings us to our next major symptom, the decay of intimacy. Genuine love and deep emotional connection, they've been completely replaced by mechanical, meaningless lust. Take the vignette of the typist and the young clerk. They have this romantic encounter, but it is totally devoid of passion. The clerk is vain and aggressive, and the typist is just exhausted and indifferent to the whole thing. When he finally leaves, she doesn't feel longing or heartbreak. She's mostly just glad it's over. She smooths her hair with an automatic hand and just puts a record on the gramophone. It's entirely robotic. And honestly, it fits that it feels so robotic, because Eliot himself was working this incredibly mind-numbing job at a London bank while he was observing all this modern exhaustion. Intimacy has basically become just another empty chore. We see this decay of human empathy play out again in a working-class pub scene, heavily punctuated by the bartender yelling, "Hurry up, please, it's time for last call." Two women are sitting around gossiping about their friend Lil. Lil's husband, Albert, is coming back from the army, and Lil looks terrible because she recently took pills to induce an abortion. But instead of showing even an ounce of empathy, her friend practically scolds her. She warns her that if she doesn't go out of her way to please Albert, other women definitely will. It's a brutal scene. The trauma of the war and the sheer pressures of survival have entirely eroded human compassion. Let's move to part 4. The crisis of faith, the root cause of the illness. So we've clearly identified the symptoms, isolation and lovelessness. But what is the root cause behind all of this? Well, it's a massive, gaping spiritual void. Throughout the entire poem, characters are constantly brushing up against religion and spirituality, but they completely fail to actually practice it or find any real comfort in it. Madame Sostres uses ancient tarot cards, but just to peddle cheap fortunes. We see empty chapels with doors just swinging in the wind. We see the dry Ganges River desperately waiting for rain. The symbols of faith are all around them, everywhere they look, but the actual spiritual nourishment is completely gone. And what replaces that faith? Nihilism. Without a moral or spiritual grounding, society just drifts. People are reduced to empty, meaningless little routines just to pass the time. As one wealthy, deeply anxious woman in the poem realizes, her entire life consists of just waiting for the hot water at 10, and if it rains, a closed car at 4. There's absolutely no higher purpose. It's just a schedule designed to avoid the crushing weight of existence. I can connect nothing with nothing. This line is absolutely crucial. It represents the tragic, absolute peak of this modern nihilism. The modern individual, entirely stripped of community, stripped of meaningful love, and stripped of faith, feels utterly incapable of making sense of the world. They are surrounded by all these fragments of life, but they completely lack the glue to put anything together. Which finally brings us to part 5, Death and Rebirth, the Prognosis and Cure. Now, Eliot doesn't just leave us to rot in this bleak diagnosis. He actually argues that in order to achieve renewal, we absolutely must first accept and pass through destruction. Yes, it's true that the poem is filled with endings. We see literal corpses, we see drowned sailors, failed marriages, and completely ruined landscapes. But Eliot suggests that this destruction isn't just a dead end, it's a prerequisite. Think of it like a forest fire. It has to clear out all the dead wood so that new seeds can sprout. The total collapse of the modern ego is completely necessary before the metaphorical spring rain can finally arrive to wash the wasteland clean. The poem's shortest section tells this really brief story of Phlebas, a drowned Phoenician sailor. As he sinks deep into the ocean, he forgets the cry of the gulls, and, much more importantly, he completely forgets his profit and his loss. It's a universal warning to us as readers. No matter how tall or handsome or wealthy you are, the current of time will inevitably pick your bones in whispers. All our modern vanity will end, and we have to surrender to this truth. So what exactly is the alternative to the closed cars and the hot water at 10? Well, Eliot points us toward profound Eastern philosophies. The thunder finally speaks over the dry mountains, offering 3 commands in Sanskrit: datta, dayadvam, damyata. Give, sympathize, and control. Giving of oneself, breaking out of the prison of the self to truly sympathize with others, and bringing one's own desires under strict self-control. Eliot concludes this incredibly thematic, exhausting journey with these powerful final lines. He's essentially suggesting that it almost doesn't matter which specific faith you choose, Eastern or Western. Any genuine spiritual tradition that requires you to give, to sympathize, and to control yourself is infinitely better than the selfish nihilism of the modern world. Because only by adopting those principles can we ever hope to reach Shanti, 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 the peace that passes all understanding. Which brings us to the end of our explainer. We've officially diagnosed the wasteland, we've seen its terrible symptoms, and we've explored the cure. But what about you? Take a look at your own daily routines. Are you just waiting for the hot water at 10? Or are you finding ways to genuinely connect, give, and sympathize with the people around you? I'll leave you to reflect on how you might find your own meaning and plant your own roots right in the middle of our modern wasteland.